Are you aware of how trauma impacts your classroom? How can teachers who are not trained become more aware of the needs of their students? Today, on episode 134 of the DIESOL podcast, we're taking a first look at trauma awareness in the adult ESOL classroom.
Welcome to the DIESOL podcast, where we focus on developing innovation in English as a second or other language. I'm Brent Warner, professor of ESL and author of EdTech for Multilingual Learners. I guess I got to say something else,
I
right?
forgot.
And of course, I'm here with ESL Reyes, award-winning educator in innovation, professional development, and specializing in teacher training with an EdTech focus. ESL, we're not really talking EdTech today. We're talking something
No.
else. This is a topic we've mentioned a few times in the past, and you've wanted to do. Actually, you've wanted to do several episodes on this. But we're kind of taking our first attempt at it today. So what are we into?
Today we're looking at trauma in the adult ESOL classroom, and it is a heavy topic, so we just have pushed this conversation away, and I think it's finally enough, and we do need to be talking about this, especially given the circumstances. In our field, we're gonna be surrounded by populations that have more likely than not experienced trauma, and we should have a disclaimer that we are not formally trained in dealing with trauma. And for that very reason, we're looking at research articles for ways that we can best support our students while they're in our classrooms. So a big thank you to our friend of the pod, Teresa Beswick, because I had asked her for resources a while back. And she gave me so many resources, and I've been working on them, powering through, reading through them, and finally we're able to take a look. So she's also the co-founder of the TEFL Development Hub online, and you can find her on Instagram.
Awesome. Yeah. So this is, as you mentioned, we've talked about it a lot. I feel very underqualified, on this conversation. So I think if you're kind of in the same place as me, we're just kind of sitting here like, what are the things we need to recognize? What are the things that that goes on around these conversations? Maybe some people have avoided it. It's just like another thing to take on. That's a big feeling for a lot of people. It's just like, okay, like another heavy thing to take on on top of the work that I'm already doing, right? So I totally understand all of that. But that said, like, at some point, we have to recognize the world we're living in and recognize that people have, needs that change and that might impact our classes in ways we hadn't thought about. So, Michelle, you're going to be kind of guiding us through this conversation because you know a bit more about it than I do. But to everybody, take that disclaimer in mind. If you want to start getting involved with it, you're really going to have to do some real work on it. But if you've been like, hey, what's the deal here? Let's look at it today. So, Michelle, let's start with just the basic. What is trauma?
Okay. So, Brian, are you familiar with Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote The Body Keeps the Score? Have you heard of him?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so he has a very popular book that many researchers and I think counselors and therapists look at. He's got the most experience, and I think it's like 30 years of research worth of studies. And he defines trauma as not just an event that took some time in the past. It is also the imprint left by that experience on our mind, brain, and body. This imprint has ongoing consequences for how the human organism manages to survive in the present. Trauma results in a fundamental reorganization of the way mind and brain manage perceptions. And here's the key. It changes not only how we think and what we think about, but also our very capacity to think. And so that has a lot of implications for our students.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I can't imagine the word trauma without kind of imagining something negative, right? But this
Mm-hmm.
definition doesn't actually talk about negative issues. I'm not sure if that's just kind of how he defined it, or if it's intentional there. But like, it talks about, it's this idea that we are reorganizing, or kind of reshifting the way we think about things because of these experiences, right? And so I'm always like, oh, okay, like if you uh, if you grew up in a low income household, right, you might have trauma around some of that, and like how you deal with money, or what your expectations are of people doing things, right? Obviously, now as we're talking about war torn areas, right, and how much how you would interact with a stranger in some of those situations, right? So, anyways, yeah, it's a fascinating dis- uh, description here. I think we need to get a lot deeper into it than this, though.
Yeah, well, I think the important part is that you don't need to have a negative experience necessarily in the way that we think of it as this big event.
Mm.
It's the impact it had on you. So, for example, those of you that don't know, I have a phobia of butterflies. Okay, butterflies are not going to eat me or kill me or whatever. They are not a threat to me, but my body perceives them as a threat due to, I don't know, I think when I was little, um, one got stuck to my hat, and so I saw the shadow of it fluttering, and I didn't know what it was. So I
Mm.
that was so imprinted in my brain that now I like jerk whenever I see butterflies. So it's not necessarily this big disastrous thing. It's the that it kick started your nervous system, right? And
Mm.
anything that's kickstarting your nervous system is going to trigger that impact of fight or flight or freeze, or the reaction, right? Because your brain just
Right.
wants to protect you. And so here we're gonna get a little bit deeper now. Then, so how does trauma impact the brain, and what does that look like in the classroom?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
there are three areas when we looked at research, and all of these sources are going to be listed in our show notes. There are three areas of the brain, three network areas that monitor and enforce attention control. And these are the salience network. And this network allows human to determine what stimuli to focus on. The default mode network, which assists in self regulation, and the central executive network, which is critical for controlling thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. So,
Okay, so
what does that?
salience, default, and central executive network. We're gonna have to remember
Yeah.
these. Okay, let's
Mm-hmm.
talk about them one at a time then.
Mm-hmm.
All right, which do we start
So,
with?
let's start with the working memory and
Okay,
executive function.
all right. What do we got there? What
So,
does it mean?
so what does that mean? Well, you have impaired social or impaired working, sorry, impaired spatial working memory, maybe underdevelopment of the prefrontal cortex, and the inability to carry out goal setting and self control. So, kind of like what we look at in teenagers.
Okay, so
um,
if you have some trauma related
mm-hmm,
impairments around this, right? So around
mm-hmm,
your
mm-hmm,
executive function, around your working memory, um, I think that's interesting. Impaired spatial working memory, right? Like,
mm-hmm,
so spatial memory is like the understanding the physical differences between things, right?
mm-hmm.
Uh, Inability to carry out goal setting and self control. Okay, so as I slow down and think about this, right now it starts to become a little bit clear about how this might show up in a classroom. But
Mm-hmm.
Michelle, I know you've got some info on that. So how does it look?
Yeah, so in adults, this might be observable in difficulty retaining new vocabulary or grammar, the inability to control thoughts, emotions, behaviors. So maybe a quick temper or volatile emotions, maybe low participation and difficulty with complex tasks or planning. So again, you might say, "Oh, I have this lazy student who has no study skills or poor study skills," but we're not thinking about the underlying cause of that. And it could very well be that this student is worried about their parents, worried about their neighbors, worried about their children, or worried about their
Mm.
family back home. And yes, or if you've experienced that already somewhere else and you're coming to a classroom situation, having to remember all of that information is going to be overload on your cognitive system.
Okay. So I'm going to pause it here because
Mm-hmm.
immediately I'm already thinking of a student that I've had in the past, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like difficulty retaining new vocab, grammar, right? Difficulty with complex tasks or planning things out, right? Had a lot of problems with this student. Not problems. I mean, this was a good student, right? Like they were trying, they were doing all
Mm-hmm.
the things, but like they were never. It was like no matter how many times we talked about things, no matter how many
Mm-hmm.
different approaches, it always struggle with like just like locking in the changes that it's like, hey, we've talked about this 20
Mm-hmm.
times, like what's not happening here, right? And so I want to be careful that I don't just instantly go, okay, well, now I know the answer is
Mm-hmm.
that you're dealing with trauma, right? So
Yeah.
it's not that, but it's also that it hadn't really been a consideration before, right? And
Right.
so being aware of this and going, okay, hold on, let's look at this as a consideration. Maybe this is a thing that's going on. And so let's be careful not to immediately diagnose anybody on these
Right. And
things, right?
again,
Yeah.
I think the important part here is to be aware. Be aware that it's not always the thing that we think. And it
Mm.
doesn't have to be trauma. It could be something else. And but again, because of what our students are probably facing and having questions about recently, I think it's important to have that as one of the things you also consider so that you're informed, and you don't just jump to conclusions. That we don't want to jump to conclusions ever. And I think that's one of the reasons why I want to talk about this.
Great. Okay. So what's next?
So okay, so then the other cognitive system that's affected is the salience network, which is attention, and this is difficulty focusing and sustaining attention, disruption in determining what to focus on. And in the classroom, this might manifest itself as concentration difficulty. So we often have students who look like they're very hyperactive, or you quickly lose them. Maybe they're hypervigilant. I've had students who um, react very quickly, or seem like they talk about how everything bad is happening to them all the time. And it might be something like they didn't score well on a quiz that day, or they forgot their book. There's emotional flooding. So they may very quickly become quiet or have an outburst. They may also have difficulty registering input necessary for language acquisition.
Mm.
So I don't know if that makes you think about, have I
Yeah,
had to deal with situations like this?
yeah. I mean, my first thought here
Mm-hmm.
is, like these kind of behaviors tend to be more common in
Mm-hmm.
children, right? Kids
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. But you can see them appear in different ways for adults, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
it's like they might just not just scream because they're overwhelmed in the middle of class, right? But they might have enough awareness, like they might still have something happening, and then maybe they just walk out of the middle of class, right? And it's like, okay, are
Yeah.
is something going on here? Like what's happening, right? And maybe they don't even make it obvious. Like a lot of times I've seen students walk away while they're kind of like looking at their phone, like as though I've got an important phone call to take, and maybe that's what's going on. Or maybe it's just like, hold on, I need to get myself cleared from this space for 5 minutes or whatever else it is. So
Yeah.
I could see different ways of this showing up.
Yeah. So again, you bring up a good point that these are very easily observable in children, and we're able to say like, okay, the child's overwhelmed. Okay, they're dealing with a change in the household. But in adults, we don't expect these behaviors to show up that way, and they're just a little more subtle. You might have students in a group who suddenly are. I just can think of one example years ago where a student got very upset at his group and threw down his backpack and stormed out of the university classroom.
Mm.
And everyone was shocked because we were not expecting that behavior from an adult. Come to find out later, he was upset about something that happened in the classroom. But the underlying reason was that he was failing courses already. And he had gotten in trouble and was likely going to be sent back home. So
Mm.
that is a negative. That is a negative. His brain is fight or flight or
Right,
freeze.
right, right.
And what did he
Yeah.
choose to do? Well, he fled.
Yeah.
But that impacts the rest of the class. And at that time, I just thought, oh my goodness, let me just make sure everyone is safe.
Okay, so we talked about working memory executive function. We talked about the salience network. Is there anything else?
Yeah, the one we always mention, the affective filter. And we also
Ah.
said a fight or flight, affective filter. So you tell us what the affective filter is and why is that important?
Yeah, well, the effective filter is, we've got this idea like when we're activating stress hormones,
Mm-hmm.
that can
Mm-hmm.
limit the information that flows to our higher cognitive networks, right? Stress slows us down. Stress impedes our language learning, right? And so,
Mm-hmm.
so it's kind of like we're blocking off opportunities or blocking off
Mm-hmm.
options because we just need to filter out more information, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so that is intentionally, like our bodies are doing that intentionally, saying, hold on, slow down, overwhelm,
Mm-hmm.
there's too much going on in here. And so when we're talking about, a lot of times we'll talk about this in the way of like lowering the effective filter is how teachers in our field talk about it all the time, right? How do we lower that
Mm-hmm.
effective filter? How do we make that student feel
Mm-hmm.
more welcome into the classroom, that they have a spot in there, that they can do this assignment that they're talking about, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
it runs the opposite side of the scaffolding conversation, right? So it's like, hey, we need to lower the effective filter to bring it to make it possible for you to reach here, but we also have to scaffold so that you can build it up to get to that spot, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so these are what I think about when I think about the general idea of the effective
Mm-hmm.
filter.
And what might that look like in the classroom? I know you and I have done episodes on icebreakers and making the classroom a
Mm-hmm.
more friendly place, but and the affective filter itself. But what does that look like?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly we see students that are not wanting to talk, right, or
Mm-hmm. Too
hesitant to
shy,
speak up. Yeah, they're too shy,
afraid.
right? And it's tricky, right? Because as teachers, it's like we know they need to get past that. We need to break some of that, but then we're also got this other side of things where it's like, oh well, but we don't want to traumatize, or push them into places where they're uncomfortable. But I do struggle with that sometimes because of both sides of
Mm-hmm.
that conversation, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
there's also that side where we're like, well, hold on a second. People need to be pushed sometimes into places where they are uncomfortable in order to get past that. And it's like sometimes yes and sometimes no, right? And so do
Mm-hmm.
we know when we're making a good decision around that? I am not almost always, like when students give me a wrong answer, I very rarely say no. Right? Like I don't
Mm-hmm.
throw like no you're wrong like right in people's faces, and I'm like let's think about that a little bit more, or well, what if we said this, or maybe that works in some context but not in this context, like. So I am very hesitant, and I think it's because of my own kind of wariness around this
Mm-hmm.
effective filter area, where it's like, let me just, I don't want to make a person feel stupid for making a wrong
Mm-hmm.
guess on
Mm-hmm.
a no impact question in the middle of class, right? But at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, like it's just a tricky zone there.
Yeah. And again, I think it's important to be aware because, yes, we're adding one more thing you have to remember, but
Mm-hmm.
it makes you a better instructor. It makes you a better support system for your student. We can't, I mean, whether we like it or not, in many cases, we're their only support system. And
Mm-hmm.
so, not jumping to conclusions and then pausing a little bit more and maybe being more empathetic, that will when you're a lot of points in the classroom and you're also addressing issues that you may not even be aware of.
And can I point out, we're going to go on break in
Yeah.
just a second here, but can I
Mm-hmm.
point out that like I definitely recognize that this stuff feels overwhelming to go like, okay, I
Mm.
have to be aware of
It
this. I have to
is.
think of
It's
this, right? Even
overwhelming.
just as the overwhelming on the teacher's perspective, right? Like it's
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, hold
Mm-hmm.
on a second. I have a lot of this stuff to deal with. But
Mm-hmm.
learning that also makes it less heavy when you're dealing with it in the moment, right? Which is
Right.
that like, hey, oh, now I can kind of deal with this. And so the heaviness is like you take it on up front to learn what it means, but actually you deal with it a lot better in the actual situations, and maybe you can guide the students through much more smoothly than you
Mm-hmm.
might if you just said, well, okay, now I have to imagine that I'm figuring out all these solutions to things because I have no background in it and I'm just trying to be empathetic to my student. like having that repertoire built up for yourself can
Mm-hmm.
give you a lot of relief later on when the real problems come.
And Brent, I have to say here that I've been reading these research articles for the longest. I feel like it's a long time because it's been about maybe a year and a half, maybe more since I got all of these resources.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel better equipped and I'm more comfortable in the classroom talking about these issues. And so again, the later you start, the bigger the gap becomes and the
Mm-hmm.
scarier it is, right? So it's a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
something is better than zero. So,
Indeed.
our break.
All right, so I will be
Diesel,
at TESOL, and Michelle, I still
Diesel.
haven't convinced you to come, have I?
I got no funds. I got no money. I got no annual leave.
No, it's not. None of it's working out right now. But
No.
I will be doing a session on Thursday, March 26th at 8 a.m. It's called 10 Tools
Mm-hmm.
to Lighten Teachers' Loads. It will be uh, a more lighthearted conversation than we're having right now. but
Yes.
hope useful. Like what I'm looking for is useful, practical things that you can understand, that you can kind of work with.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you're wanting to join me bright and early on Thursday morning, I will be there. And so, please come find me.
It's early,
And
but you know what? He's funny or corny, so you can.
corny. Sorry, I
He'll
don't
keep
think
you
of myself
awake.
in those words. Yeah, I think my presentations are pretty lively. I guess.
No,
Yeah, like I try to
he's
keep them,
punchy.
try to keep
Yeah.
people awake. Yeah.
So
Um,
show up 8 a.m. You won't
yeah.
miss it. I mean, you won't regret it.
You won't.
You won't want to
You
miss
won't miss it.
it. You
You
won't
won't
want to
miss
miss
it.
it. You won't
That's not
regret.
the. Great. Thanks.
I'm filled
Very
with
helpful.
insults. I had so many
I know.
insults
I know.
pre-show.
You're just burning me all day long here. All right, but also, so that'll be my session. But
Mm-hmm.
also, if you're interested in
But
today's
also,
topic, and that's not all. If you're interested in
Mhm.
trauma, so I just searched
If you're
into the
interested in
schedule.
trauma.
Yeah, if you're interested in the trauma side of things, I did search it. There's like at least
Hmm.
9 different trauma informed
Yeah.
teaching sessions going on. So
Yeah.
it's a well recognized and needed conversation by TESOL, and there will be a lot of good. Looks like there's a lot of good sessions on it, and that's
Hmm.
just from me typing in the word trauma. I'm sure
Hmm.
that there are other ones that are kind of phrasing this on like supporting students through difficult time,
Hmm.
things
Hmm.
that don't exactly have the word trauma in the title, but are still kind
Hmm.
of around that idea. So take a look. Try to get to
Yeah.
a couple sessions if you can. I know we're busy. There's lots of good choices to go from, but peek through, see what might be useful for you if this topic is interesting to you. All right, so Michelle,
Hmm.
we're back, and
Hmm.
we're going to talk a little bit just about some
Hmm.
strategies
Hmm.
to consider. Right, we're not, just things to think about, and again, we're
Hmm.
providing a lot of resources a little bit later in the show notes. And so, what are some of the things that strategies that teachers can consider as they're dealing with all of these trauma-related issues?
Yeah. So first, I want to say that a lot of resources can be found through the TESOL site. If you follow them on their Instagram, they recently put out a link, and I didn't go through them yet because there's a ton of them.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a compilation of good sources, so check them out on Instagram. I looked at the resources that Teresa gave me. So, first of all, rapport and interaction. Brent, you and I have talked about this, trauma or no trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got to build trust and you reduce the affective filter. So, how do you do that? Well, ask, I think many of us already do that, but ask about their family, ask about hobbies, use positive body language, smiling, nodding, all the external visual things that help someone to feel welcome or feel like they're in a non-threatening environment. And sometimes expect unexpected responses and avoid putting students on the spot. I have had unexpected responses where a student will blurt out everything that happened and I was not prepared. And in other cultures, sometimes when you do ask about how they're doing, they're going to tell you how they're doing, whether it's pleasant or not pleasant. If they're angry, they might tell you. So,
Wasn't that wonderful? I mean, what a novel concept, telling you how you feel when you ask
oh,
how you feel, right?
so it's like, because we're just like, hi, how are you? I'm fine, thank
Yeah.
you. And you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, well, we all know the game, right? But it's like it is interesting when we break that mold.
Mm-hmm.
So, all
Mm-hmm.
right, great. So build some more rapport. Work on your interaction. I will say there are some times when it's like you try and it's rough, right? Like you try to, and it's like, oh, this student's just not wanting to open that up at all yet, right? And so don't give up if it doesn't work one time, right? Just figure out different approaches.
Mm-hmm. You also should think about your instructional design.
Mm-hmm.
The learner needs might be the memory deficits, right, and attention control. So scaffolding instruction to the task level, offering different ways of repetition, frequent repetition, writing things on the board, but also maybe modeling it. In your body language, using a lot of body language, encouraging students, and using concrete examples. So again, a lot of us are already doing this. So it's not mind blowing stuff. Oh, what a terrible thing to hear in the background. There's an emergency vehicle. Um, but teaching strategies to students that will help them to self regulate. So there are times, for example, that a student may become upset because they're not achieving, I don't know, their score, or they're not receiving information from the university they're applying to after your class, or they got a parking ticket. But those situations become a chance for you to help them regulate their nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes they're not used to our culture. They're not used to, like, yeah, here you got to go to court and pay your bill, your parking ticket. It's not like an app where you just pay, I think, and not in all states, right? So helping them navigate through those situations gives them strategies.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm going to add in here because we're talking a little bit about this
Mm-hmm.
in on our campus. We're doing a book club and we're reading The Opposite of Cheating, and we're doing a little book club around it. And one
Mm-hmm.
of the conversations was, a lot of times as teachers, we think we're being clear on the directions, or we put it up on our LMS and we're like, hey, this is
Yeah.
this is what to do. And so one technique to deal with that is
Mm-hmm.
to run it through AI, right? And say like, how would
Mm-hmm.
you describe this in a much easier way for someone who's
Mm-hmm.
learning the language, right? And so it's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, okay. I felt because because I've been teaching for so many years that
Mm-hmm.
obviously my ideas and the way I present it is very clear. And you're like, hold on a second. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
let's really think about that, because we get this false sense of how well we know something because we've been doing it for so many years, but our students, it's their first time in our class, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so how are you building that design for them and not for what you know, but for what they don't know? So just be careful of that.
Right. Um, and so again, focusing on strengths and letting students, I mean, I've had plenty of students who are very quick to tell me where their weakness is, and they're just very down on themselves, but they're also self deprecating.
Mm-hmm.
And while it's important to understand weaknesses so that we can strengthen them, it's also important to honor the things that you can do, because oftentimes language learners have tunnel vision and they don't realize that they indeed are learning, even if it's a little bit and they can't recognize it, a little bit at a time. And so I draw attention to, like, hey, yesterday you couldn't do that, but guess what? I just heard you do it
Mm-hmm.
today. That's a great thing. A win is a win.
Yep.
And I always say something is better than zero. Something is better than nothing. Yep.
Yeah, I was surprised recently when a student kind of like, I said something, nice, like, good job, you're growing on this. I said something on that, and it really stood out to him. And he's like, oh, I was so happy when I got your message because I know I've been
Mm-hmm.
working on it. And I was like, oh, yeah. And I didn't think that much about it, but I'm like, but I went out of my way to say, hey, like, you are growing in this spot that we've been talking about, right? And
Mm-hmm.
he's like, I was really, really happy to get that because I felt like I hadn't. And so, anyways, just to be aware that, like, it didn't take much from me, but it impacted him in a big way.
Right. And when we're doing that positive self-talk, we're modeling for them. In many cultures, or maybe generation, depending, we're used to hearing about our flaws from our parents or from the people
Mm,
around us. And so you've got to retrain the brain to look for the areas that you can recognize growth in, because that's growth. And so pretty soon your body starts to react to that thinking, and then you're changing the chemistry in your brain, in your body, and you're rewiring those connections. So again, all goes back to neuroplasticity,
mm.
and that's an area that's fascinating. So
So when I asked you earlier today if I look handsome, you should have said yes, not no. Is that...
Yes, Brent. A
Thank you,
little
thank
is
you.
better than
Hey,
zero.
I gotta feed myself. That's the deal, right? So, all right. So we're running out of time. What else we got here?
Yes.
What are the things that we need to talk about here?
Last, also, thinking about your assessment and feedback. And again, the learner needs to not have so much anxiety and also promoting growth, right? So and again, I want to say that, and I always think on the positive side, I think that our audience is probably the type of audience who wants to grow, wants to do things in a way that supports students and helps them be a positive change in the classroom. But giving supportive feedback that's focused on reduction of negative thinking, as I was saying, rewiring your brain, allowing students to check responses with others before group feedback or before you give the feedback. Again, having someone that they trust and that is going to maybe gently tell them or brutally honest, but because they're their friend, they may not be so rid with anxiety. Utilizing self-assessments. I think self-assessments, and you and I have talked about that, reflections, right? Self-assessments and reflections, and maximizing choice in how the learning is demonstrated, because maybe there's a student who can perform the task, but not in the same way that others, or in the same standard way that everyone else is used to. I know you do a lot of that in your classroom, right?
Yeah, yeah. So
Especially around, I know around homework, you've done a lot of tweaks and tried a lot of different techniques.
Yeah, and I always do. I still, it's like, hey, is this working? And I found sometimes it's interesting because sometimes they work for us, and sometimes they work for a while and then kind of fade out. And so you have to kind of keep practicing with these things. But yeah, having some level for reflection. I'm actually thinking about this as I'm looking at it, like the utilizing self-assessment. Like we could build some cool bots that help students, that don't give them any answers, but that could like say, hey, let's actually build that out in a way that like just ask the students to reflect and assess their own work, not that gives them any feedback or like any changes to their assignment, right? And so a lot of students don't know where to begin with it, like how do I self-assess, right? And so even guiding through that process could, with the bot on their own time, could be really useful.
Well, it's just, scaffolding their own feedback and helping them through it.
Okay, so Michelle, I know there's a lot more to talk about on this topic, and so you're kind of like, well, maybe we could do multi-parts, like get next one a little later and do more conversations on it as we go. I think that is a good idea, but today we're probably going to have to wrap and kind of start closing things out here, if that's okay.
Yeah. So again, we'll list all of the resources in our show notes, and a big thank you to Teresa, because she has been a fountain of just a lot of information. So
yeah, awesome.
Okay, it is time for our fun finds. And Brent earlier asked me if my whole purpose for the fun finds was to annoy people. And I mean, you gotta find joy in things. So I found or annoying Brent. So something that brings me so much joy, much more joy than 6-7, because 6-7 is dead, much to Brent's disappointment, is an old meme from 2014. And I only recently found out about it, but it's the Hamoud Habibi dancing meme. And it's this little pixelated little dancing boy that originated in Arab-speaking countries. I actually don't know which one, but he just dances and he sings this kind of creepy little jingle. But it recently resurfaced and is trending on social media because people are recreating the dance, and they're recreating it with AI. They're recreating it with themselves, with their grandparents, and it's just so funny. And I find joy in that. And Brent did not know about Hamoud Habibi, but now he knows.
Well, I know for today. We'll see if I keep that in my memory for a long time.
Hey, mention it to your students, especially if they speak Arabic. They will know and they'll
Okay.
be impressed. So impressed. Ask them about Hamoud Habibi.
It'll be interesting. Will they be impressed or will they be like, dude, that's so old, right? Like,
They're going to
because
say,
they'll
how
be
do
like,
you know that?
some of my students, we have to recognize they would have been 4 years old when that came out, right? So,
Yeah, but they know. And if you know, you know. Some of them will tell me, oh, so here's the other one of my students who's like 18 years old told me, oh, I used to be so creeped out by him because he used to show up as a character on Minecraft. And so there's like this whole lore around it where the little boy chases you and there's like a little girl version of him and there's all sorts of versions of him. So you could probably see Hamoud Habibi on your screen right now. But yeah, check him out.
okay. And you have no idea what she's talking about, like I have no idea what she's talking about. You can join the club. All right. So mine is a YouTube channel called Professor of Rock. It is a it's just a it's just this guy who goes through all sorts of really interesting things about rock history. He tells cool little stories about things. It could be deep, long lore stories, or it could be, like what happened with this single or this one-hit wonder or whatever else it is. He does a ton. So he does like every day he does like 30-minute shows and he talks about these different things. It's really
What's the first one
impressive.
you've watched? Or how'd you find it? Like, what should
It
I
just
click on?
Well, it kind of depends on what you're interested in, right? Because there does
Okay,
cover.
so
So the problem here's two problems with it. The biggest problem to me is like he kind of does clickbaity titles, right? And so you kind of have to just
we
watch
do
them to
clickbaity
see.
titles.
This is more like even more than this, right? So like look at this. I hated this band until I met them, right? This song had to trick racists so their kids could watch the show, right? All these
Oh,
different things. It's like okay, but it was really
yeah,
interesting.
I'm going to click.
Yeah, and so like I watched, I'm like, it wasn't really about that, right? It was like it was much deeper about like popular cartoon song tracks that were that had higher success rates than the show itself, right? That's what it ended up being. But in order to get seen, he has to do some of these things. So you just kind of have to pick and choose. Like maybe loosely, I'm interested in this thing, and then you can go and watch an episode. Unfortunately, he seems to be having these problems with like AI stealing his content. So he mentions it. He kind of talks about that in some of the language. So it is
Yeah.
very tricky. So it's just like, do you want to watch this? Do you want to sit down for half an hour, maybe while you're having lunch, and just kind of hear what this guy's talking about? He is really deeply knowledgeable about all sorts of rock music and things like that. And he's a big music fan. So I really do like them. But it is you just kind of have to pick and choose what you're getting or what you're watching when you show it. So Professor of Rock on YouTube.
Cool. All right. Well, if you stuck through and made it to the end of this episode, you can find the show notes and other episodes at diesel.org. You can find this episode at diesel.org/134. You can find us on most socials at dieselpod.
Yes, you can find me at Brent G. Warner.
And me at Ixy_Pixie_. That's PIXY_PIXY_. Don't find me anymore.
Yeah. You can find us here. You can find us on diesel.org.
Yeah.
So, all right. Thanks everybody so much, and I will see some of you at
Yeah.
Diesel, and I think
Find
probably
him.
the next episode
You'll
after
have
that
stickers,
will be a wrap up.
patches,
I will have
buttons,
I have my stuffs
pins.
that I need to bring and whatever.
Get some swag.
All right. See you all there.
Bye.